So it looks like we have the majority of our participants have joined the webinar. Once again, I thank you for joining this afternoon. My name is David Kusek. I'm a business analytics specialist with John Daniel Associates. We are a Qlik partner. So today, I have a few slides for you before we jump into the demonstration of the product. Our agenda is just going to be a quick overview of the Qlik Sense product offering. If you're unfamiliar with what Qlik is doing with this new product and what flavors it comes in, I'll just cover that. We're going to release our intuition this afternoon by demoing the product from the perspective of sort of the average user information consumer inside of the organization. And then we'll also have a brief Q&A session if there's questions at the end of the presentation. So please use the Q&A window to submit your questions, and then I'll reserve about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to address any questions that come up. Starting off, Qlik Sense, as I said, is offered in a couple different flavors. There's a full desktop product. This is an installation that sits on your desktop. It has all the features that you're going to see today, well, the majority of the features you're going to see today. And that's a free product. It's a free offering. You can load up as much data as you want to that to do your analysis to get a sense of what Qlik Sense is all about. Qlik is offering this Qlik Cloud, and it's really in its infancy, but the initial release of Qlik Cloud allows someone using the desktop version of the product to publish something they've built and share it out to, I think, with up to 3 people right now. So that would allow you to visualize that application on a mobile device, on a browser. It removes some of the collaboration features that you get with the full Qlik Sense platform offering here on the right-hand side, but it's a stepped approach in getting you there if you're interested in knowing what the product's all about. So on the right-hand side really is where we're going to spend the majority of the time, or all of our time today, which is the full Qlik Sense platform offering. So this is deployed either on a cloud or on-premise. It gives you the scheduling ability, the security, libraries, collaboration, all that stuff that you would expect from a server platform. Before we jump into the actual demonstration, the title of this webinar is about unleashing your intuition. And I really think that we'll cover some of these things throughout our demonstration today, but what Qlik Sense really is all about for me in terms of intuition is this collection of these features, and some of them seem very simplistic, that allows, I would say, pretty much anyone inside an organization that's interested in getting access to data and information a very easy path to get there because of the way that it's designed. Using the product is very intuitive. And I'm going to explain some of those features and sort of how you would put those into practice inside of your organization today. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into the demo portion now this afternoon. The first screen that we're seeing here is Qlik Sense is a browser-based product, so I'm in a Chrome browser. This is the hub. This is really the starting point. This is going to house all your applications. This is the jumping-off point for your analysis. I have streams listed on the left-hand side. I'm not going to get too much into this this afternoon, but these 3 streams here are published, and then anything up here is not published. So to start, I'm going to go into an application that's not been published because I want to start sort of from a technical perspective just by showing you what's behind the application that I'm going to be demonstrating today. So I'm going to go into the data model viewer here and let this load up. And what we'll be looking at is an example, actually a visual representation of all the tables that are loaded into this data model. The reason why I'm showing you this is because I'm not demoing just from one Excel sheet or one table where everything was nicely put together in columns and rows, and then we're gonna build an application on top of it. This is driven by real data. We have some associations or some joins between our data here, snowflaking out from a central fact table. And the power of Qlik Sense is really this underlying associative engine. Associating all this data together, it's going to have knowledge about this data. So when we start to do our analysis, it gives us feedback to help guide us through that analysis. So this will all come together once I start showing the features, but I may reference back to this data model throughout the presentation today. So I'm going to come back over to my hub, and I'm actually going to look at that same application, but the published version of that application. And when I first start looking into something, and I think this is probably similar for everyone, is that we always look to start it from a place that we know. It helps us to relate things to something that we know. So I'm going to open up one of these tabs here, one of these sheets, and we see some information laid out here. And I may know about this data, I may not know about this data, but I want to start with something I know. So I'm going to use this Associative Search feature that Sense provides. And what's nice about this search is that it's indexed all the data that was in that data model that I just showed you. Whether it was in one table or in multiple tables, all the data is indexed here. So I might know that I'm looking for a salesperson and her name is Judy Thurman. So as I start typing, Sense is providing feedback to me in the search criteria to say, you have a match here of Judy, which is in the column order by header, and then you also have a couple matches in the sales rep name. And I know that Judy's a sales rep, so I know that's the one that I'm looking for. But you can also see it returns a different Judy because that also matches my search string. So I'm just going to go ahead and type the rest of her name here. And I want to make that a literal search, so it surrounds it by quotes. It knows that that's who I'm looking for. But it also gives me the ability to add additional search criteria for things that are associated. So now I'm looking for Central. And I know that I want to look at Judy, the sales rep, who is in the Central region. But Sense is also displaying some things about the data here that may provide alternatives or other insight to me. I could see that I have customers who also have Central in their name. And I also have some customer addresses that have Central in them. The other thing that Sense does, as you can see here, the way that it's ranking these search results, it's based on an underlying algorithm, and it's populating what it thinks would be what I'm looking for. So what's the most likely match that the user is looking for? And in this case, it really is Judy Thurman Central. And I really only want to do analysis where the shipment month was January. And you can see that it returns a couple different Januaries for matches. It says, okay, you have a shipment month of January, and then you also have, let's say this is a sales month of January. But I'm really interested in this selection, so that's the one that I move forward with. Without looking at anything else in the application, Sense through that search feature allows really any user to come in here and start from a perspective that they know. What you see happen after I make that selection on my search results is Sense refreshes the data in these charts to reflect what happened for Judy Thurman in the Central region in January in particular. And I also get feedback what selections I've made across the top. So if I pop one of these open, I could see Central is highlighted in green, which means I've selected it. Anything in gray is something that, in this case, is not selected. And I also have a list of the sales reps. Now, Sense is providing visual feedback here to the user. In this case, Central is selected first, and then Judy is selected second. And you see that there's some sales reps in a lighter shade of gray, and then there's some sales reps that are in a darker shade of gray. And what this is giving me is an alternative selection. The lighter shade of gray is telling me that these users have sold in the central region, but I just don't have them selected right now. So we call those alternatives in this case. If I wanted to go ahead and look at those alternatives, I could easily say, okay, give me everyone in the central that's not Judy. And the information will refresh to look at that. I think for me, the important takeaway in terms of this feedback is that there's not very much training required from a usability perspective. I think all of us are accustomed to going out to Google or going out to Yahoo or a search engine and starting in that place. And Sense allows you to do that, easily changing selections, interacting with the data based on what you know, based on your searches. So here I'm going to just click off a couple of these filters to get back to where I started from, and we'll move forward from here. So in addition to selecting through search, as you can see here, there are no selection boxes out on this particular sheet. But if I wanted to expose those, Sense gives me the ability to look at all the possible dimensions that I could select across very quickly in this little flyout menu here. So this is what they're calling the selection tool. And if I come in here and I start making some selections, it's going to tell me what I have currently selected. Any associated information is located down here. Something that I found, and this is sort of a bit of a trick and may not be intuitive, but what you can do, because we're working in a browser environment, I have the ability to, let's say, pop this browser window out. So I just pulled that tab out, and I have a session that I'm going to put over here. I'm going to kind of condense this down. So these are my selections. And then I'm going to jump back over to my application. I'm going to open it again. And let's jump back into that sales margin. So now I have two sessions, but these two sessions are connected. So from a usability perspective, I'm able to expose all the filters that are available to me and really use this as a way to interact with the application. This may be an easier thing for me to do. Now I could have this on a second monitor. I could even have this on a mobile device, changing selections, and the browser would be refreshing my visualization. So that's a neat trick that I've found that seems useful if the user's looking to get a large amount of ways to filter or select the data. The next thing I want to talk about is actually interacting with the visualizations. And to do that, I'm going to edit this document. So this is, like I said before, this is something that is published. This is as a user would be working out on the server. And I'm actually going to create a new sheet. So in this case, we'll just call it my new sheet. And now from the user's perspective, I have this blank canvas to do what I want. And I think this is a little scary for some people that may be in data governance or in an IT role, giving users really access to do whatever they want with the data. But Sense makes it very easy for users to use things that are pre-built for them to get custom views. So what I'm going to do is, over here on my left-hand side, I have a library, and the way that I got there was just using this edit button. So that pops open my library. I'm looking at all the visualizations that have been created and stored. These are visualizations that could be created by the initial development or by other users. But I want to build a custom dashboard, and I know that what's important to me is I want to see the sales information by state. As you see, this is a drag and drop operation. And I may also want to see some detailed information of sales. So I'm going to put that out there on the bottom right. And let's see, sales. This chart looks like something I might be interested in, sales versus margin by sales rep. And then finally, now I'm not really sure what I want to put in this last spot, and it's easy to drag and drop and change things, but just a single click here gives me a little flyout of example of what this visualization looks like, and this looks like what I'm looking for, so I'm going to pop that one out there and just click done. So I didn't have to look at data, I didn't have to edit expressions, I didn't have to add dimensions, I didn't really have to know anything other than the visualizations that are important to me to do my analysis. What's great about Sense, now that I have these visualizations, I could interact with them anyway, in the same ways that I would interact with other visualizations. So the first thing I'll talk about are range selections inside of these charts. And I may be interested in looking at the margin between 40 and 45%, and only those that fall in a sales range of 5 to 10 million. Very easily, I could see, it highlights, it gives me contextual feedback of what falls into that particular range in this chart, but it also gives me a sample of what it would look like in all the other charts. And if I missed that selection by just a little bit, Sense makes it pretty easy to slide this range around and start visualizing, what happens if I push this range to a different threshold. So let's just go ahead and grab those selections. And when I click the confirm selections, it confirms the selections, and then I'm able to go on and make selections in the other objects. So now I'm looking at the chart, and maybe I want to do some selections inside of the chart. But one of the things that I need to do is I only want to look at certain states, and they may not be contiguous, so they may not be touching. How am I able to make a selection like that? There's a Lasso Tool, and this Lasso Tool actually doesn't have to completely become a circle, as you would think a lasso to be. But I could even draw a line through, maybe I'm only interested in those particular territories. So right now I'm doing this through a browser with a mouse. But if you took this and you start thinking about it in terms of this same application on an iPad, that interaction becomes very natural, where I'm using my finger now to pick out or draw lines or circle particular points of data that I'm interested in seeing. And we'll talk a second here in how this same application would be rendered if we looked at it on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device. The other thing that really jumps out to me in terms of this intuitive interaction with the data is that after every selection that I'm making, Sense is animating how things are changing. So I'm getting a visual feedback of where things were and where things are going or where they end up. And if you don't have that, you probably don't miss it. But once you see it in action, it's something that I think does sort of make sense. So I'm going to grab Ohio here, and I want you to focus on this sales versus margin by sales rep, and I'm going to add in Pennsylvania. And we could easily pick out what's happening. There's one particular sales rep that is jumping into that position, and I could see that motion as I make the selection. So again, at first glance, it's sort of a nice to have, but after you use it, all of these things reinforce that easy usability by really anyone inside the organization. And don't lose sight of that the end user actually built this tab that we're doing all these things on right now. I mean, it looks like it was designed by a developer or somebody that knew what they were doing, had product training, but this is really someone that dragged and dropped 4 objects onto a screen and has all this power to do analysis at this point. One other thing that I'll mention here is selections, even in something as simple as a detailed chart object. I'm going to sort this by total sales. So easy double click, you would expect that to happen. And then I'm going to make a selection on the, let's say, central region. Everything inside of this object now where central matches or central is in the data is highlighted in green. I'm not filtering out everything but central. It's allowing me to view context of the selected data against the other data. And from a user perspective, that's something that is very important to me. If it would just immediately filter on central, I don't really know how central ranks against the other regions in terms of sales. But instead, it gives you that ability to see the context before you move on. I'm going to move over to a tab now that I built and published, and this one's just to show how some of the objects, or most of the objects inside of Qlik Sense, have been designed intelligently, smart visualization. And as I go through these examples, I want you to understand that all these little things that have been done with these objects, how they react to users, how they're going to react to the way that I resize the browser, means that we can extend Qlik Sense further into our organization. So we can give this to people who may not have been typically information workers, who may not have been analysts, but further out into the edges of our organization, because these smart features really protect the users from, I'll say, making mistakes. From getting themselves into trouble, or from building things that they really can't get any value out of. So I'll go through a couple of those examples. One of the first things here is Smart Scroll. So there's a condensed view of the entire data that's contained inside of this object. And this is great for finding outliers. We actually saw it on the other screen as well. But this one, something may pop to my attention. It's easy to pick that up right away. If I build this whole big chart with all these dimensions or a dimension inside of it that has a ton of values, from a user perspective, I may get lost. But something like this Smart Scroll feature allows me to easily pick up data that I should be interested in or I may be interested in. And then from the way the object's designed, if I make a selection, let's go ahead and grab just international. And you'll see that I have this Smart Scroll box, and I'm going to say that's what I want to look at, and the Smart Scroll goes away. The chart knows there's really no reason to take up the real estate anymore with that Smart Scroll, because you're zoomed into a level that I could show you the entire data set. Those are things that have been thought out inside of these objects that the user can consume without thinking about, I should have designed it that way. Another one of those features is the ability to break outliers. So a big problem with charts sometimes can be that your outliers distort the way other data looks inside of your charts. In this case, I have my top 3 salespeople, and then I have this others bucket, which is 5 times the size of my top salesperson. And if Sense didn't break this for me, these 3 bars would look very small compared to the others bar. But I could still retain the context because Sense is smart. Another thing that it does is I don't worry about labeling things inside of my chart or labels overlapping on top of them. As I zoom into this chart, let me see, maybe I'm looking for Edward here. As I go deeper, when Sense has real estate, it's going to pop the labels up. Now I can always roll over these and get the tooltip information, but I'm not cluttered. It's really only giving me what I need at the level that I'm at. And there's also the ability, things like retaining context as I scroll or navigate through this information. So you'll see that as I go up to the right here, it gives me some visual feedback of, okay, there's some data points down here that you may be interested in. They're off the screen, you can't see them, but I'm still letting you know that they're there. So things like that seem simple that really come together to make this very user-friendly. I'm going to talk a bit about the responsive design. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the entire product is web-based. So even installing this on your desktop, what you're really doing is you're viewing it through a browser. And that browser, the technology is built on modern web technologies, so HTML5, CSS3, and this idea of a responsive grid. And if you know anything about web development, you understand what that means. In Qlik Sense's case, what that gives me the ability to do, let me just close here. If I resize my browser, so I don't have an iPad in front of me, I can't show you an iPad, but let me simulate that by selecting my screen, my browser resolution to be 1024 by 768, which is the size of an iPad. You'll see that my objects all resize to fit that real estate, which means that I'm not losing anything off of the screen. If I were to bring this up on an iPad, I'm going to be doing it through a browser, so this is exactly how it would look, and the way that I interact with the data would be exactly the same. So I built this in one place. Even from a user perspective, I built a custom view for myself, and I'm able to consume it anywhere, literally with no additional work. And Sense does other things with the sizing. So what if we run out of screen real estate? What if we're actually on an iPhone, which is smaller than an iPad? So let's go ahead and pull that resolution. Well, instead of trying to make all those objects tiny and still fit into the same layout, what it does is it stacks them for us. So this is, I'm now on my handheld, I'm able to scroll through my charts, and if I want to make a selection, so envisioning me clicking this with my finger, because I'm on such a small screen, instead of allowing me to make that selection, what it does is it gives me a full screen version of that object. And now I'm able to interact with it. And once I have my selection, I could go back to all of the objects that have been refreshed with the filters that I've applied. I get a nice little indication of my current selections up here. And then some of the other objects, the way that they're intelligently designed for screen real estate, here's a good example of that. So here we had that chart that was columns, and there's too many columns to display the information on the screen. So instead of Sense trying to condense all that information down, it would be unreadable. What it does is say, well, I have room for 4, and from a user perspective, I'll give you the ability to select what's most important to you. If the sales and the sales margin are the most important things to you, you can configure the chart now on the fly to view just those dimensions. And I'll pop that back over. I'm going to open my browser back up to the full screen and walk through an example of building something from scratch. So I'm going to open a new sheet. And when I did the building before, what I was using was this visualizations library. These are things that have been pre-built and pre-configured. But what if something in here, there's not something in here that matches exactly what I want to do. I want to build something on the fly. So I'll start with a chart. Let's say add a bar chart. And then Sense is going to ask me, okay, we need at least one dimension and one measure. So I am going to add a customer as the dimension, and for measure, let's say I want sales. So there's my sales by customer. And I may want to add an additional dimension into this chart. What I could do is just say, I want to see the sales goal as well on top of this. So I'm dragging a measure, dropping it onto the chart that I want to add it to, and now it's asking me, do you want to add the sales goal or do you want to replace the sales goal? In this case, I want to see them side by side. So I say add. So there's my actual versus my goal by customer. So I'll go back through here. Let's put a pie chart, dimension, let's say by region. Sales quantity in this case. Now, you can see that because Sense is laid out on this smart grid, it's not even allowing me to make a mistake by overlapping objects. It's spacing them correctly, it's sizing them correctly. So when I'm finished, everything is going to look good to me and be usable immediately. Let's do a line chart here because I want to do a trend. And I want to do, let's say, by year, month, and I want to see product margin. And it would be great instead of just one line if I could also add in additional dimension. So I want to add region as well because I want to see a line for each region. Now, in this case, what would be very valuable to me is if I was able to show some sort of a legend. And I haven't dealt with anything on the left-hand side here, but very easily in the appearance, there is colors and legends. And I'm just going to click Add Legend, and it adds it for me. So now I have this custom view of the information that I built. It's all controlled and blessed by IT. I know that the metrics are correct. I know that the dimensions are correct. I know that the data is correct. But I'm putting the power in the user's hands because the product is so easy to use that they're able to build something like this on their own without any help. Now, we may get some questions about training, but really looking at what I'm doing here, a 15-minute overview of where the library exists and how drag and drop works is pretty much all you need to know. And Sense is pretty cool because it, like I said, it won't allow you to make a mistake. For example, this particular chart is one measure, one dimension, but if I added something like a scatter plot, if I wanted to convert this to a scatter plot, it won't allow me to do that without adding the correct number of things. In this case, I need two measures and one dimension to make a scatter plot. So it's not going to give me an error message where it says, visualization won't work or not enough information to do this. It's very intuitive process. It's holding my hand, getting me to where I need to be. So now that I've built this particular sheet, actually, let me complete this. There we go. Now that I've built this particular sheet, I may want to create, let's say, some sort of presentation to give to someone. And the way that I would traditionally do this is I would take screenshots of all these things, and then I would open up PowerPoint, and I would build this PowerPoint presentation, and then I would ship it off, and I would start to get questions on it. Or I would be in front of a group of people, and I would get questions on it, and they would ask me, well, how did you come to that number, or what happens if we don't look at just this particular region and we add in another region? Sense gives the user the ability to build stories, is what they're called. And those stories are comprised of snapshots that I'm able to make from the data. So I have my camera here. I'm going to create a couple of snapshots. And now when I navigate to my stories, to create a new story, I get a very familiar look. This looks like PowerPoint. And these are the two snapshots that I've taken today. And I could start to pull this in and build some sort of a presentation that I would be able to distribute to a group. So I am able to add text. I'm able to add pointers just like I would inside a PowerPoint. And what makes this more powerful than doing it the way that I previously described are a couple of things. One, I have this ability to apply effects directly to the data. Since Sense knows about the data and everything's connected, if I want to highlight, let's say, the lowest value, let's grab, do it this way. Should be able to highlight the lowest value here. Possibly not. My apologies. And another thing that I could do here is when I'm in the presentation, I'm actually giving the presentation. If there's a question about it, I'm able to go directly back to the source information. So here I could say go to source. If somebody says, well, what's happening in July 2013, I see that there's a dip there. I want to know which salespeople were selling or not selling. Well, I don't have anything about my salespeople here, but I could go to my source, and I could very easily say, okay, well, let's go to July 2013, and then let's pop over to, let's say, interacting with Sense. I know which salespeople were selling there. Well, it looks like it may be this particular group here that I'm interested in looking further into, because that's what's causing that dip. And that's a very simplified example, but once you have your data in front of you, these things start making a lot more sense and they start clicking. So I'm going to jump over now to the Q&A section and see if any questions have come in from the group. So I have a question here. Is Qlik aggregating the data to a summary level to provide the visualization, or are these aggregations pre-built? What's great about Qlik, and this happens in QlikView and Qlik Sense, is that really the best way to load information or data into Qlik is at the detailed level, and it allows Qlik to do the aggregations on the fly. This gives you and your users the ability to move in any direction, to apply any dimension on top of a data set without having to think of the aggregations ahead of time. So I'll show you sort of an example inside of one of these objects where that aggregation is happening. Actually, let me go to a sheet that's not published. Where's my visualization link? So here's where our aggregation's happening inside of this expression. And we've made it through this entire demonstration of the product without exposing our user to writing any of these expressions or understanding how any of this is working. So this question coming across is actually a good thing. It means we've hid this from the user. But here I'm summing sales quantity. And in this case, sales quantity is loaded in at the transaction level. So each line inside of my data represents a transaction with a quantity of what was sold. And that sales quantity may exist in my fact table, and I may want to apply that to, let's say, a customer dimension or a region dimension that doesn't exist in my fact table. as long as the underlying model knows that association, I'm able to aggregate this sum of sales quantity by any of those dimensions. Let's see if there's any other questions out here. So one other thing about me building these particular objects, like I said, we're on the server, and if I would want to share this with, let's say I want to share this with another user or another group of users, if I go back to my hub, or rather back to my app overview, these are my sheets, these are the approved sheets. I could also publish my sheets. So it's going to tell me, okay, you're going to publish this sheet to what is called the community, and then that gets pushed up to all the users who have access to this application, who also have access to view the content in the community section. They're not able to edit what I've done, but they're able to use what I've done. So I could keep, as I build things, I could keep them for myself, or if it's something that's useful to the entire group, they can be pushed out here to the community. And then you could take it a step further. If something's built in the community that you'd want to add to be a part of the entire application, you could add it to the top here. But again, that's something that's very simple to do in terms of sharing. I'm going to stop sharing my desktop here for a second, and I'm just going to check if there are any QA questions. I don't see any other QA questions in here. So we have a couple more minutes left. I went quickly through the presentation today. I'll give everyone a couple more minutes to submit any questions you may have. And then if there are no more questions, that will conclude our demonstration of Qlik Sense today.